Tuvimos este día, esta sesión, con el famoso historiador Niall Ferguson. Alguien que, bueno, first, you could tell us about you.
Well, I love the word historiador, which sounds much better than historian. I'm a historian who works on the last 500 years of history. I am somebody who has focused his career on financial history at times, but also on the history of empires. And I've tried to write, for example, in my book Civilization, answers to the question, why did the West come to dominate the rest? And why is that ending in our time? And what does the end of Western predominance mean? And so anybody who's interested in my historical work need only buy a book. If you're interested in my contemporary writing about politics and economics, I publish a regular weekly column in the Boston Globe and the London Sunday Times. And so if you want to ask me questions about Donald Trump, I will happily answer them. As far as I can see, that is the only thing anybody wants to ask questions about. So I might as well go with the flow. But I didn't hear Mr. Gottlieb's talk, so I shouldn't comment on it. My own work has tended to challenge the notion of cycles in history. Cycles are very appealing to people because human life is a cycle. We're born, we're young, we grow up, we reach a peak, then we decline, just like me, we get old, and finally we die. There's a strong temptation to think of everything in those terms. So empires are supposed to rise and reach a zenith, and then they fall, and great powers are the same. I'm not convinced that is in fact the way the historical process works. Because the historical process is not organic and biological, the historical process is driven by complex systems that human beings build. Cities, states, corporations, empires. And these do not live a cyclical life if one actually studies them. There's no way of predicting how long an empire will last. And things don't decline gradually. The Soviet Union did not decline gradually, it fell off a cliff. And in the same way, globalization in the past appeared to be driving the world towards ever greater integration, and then boom, in 1914, globalization stopped. And it didn't resume again until the 1980s. What we are seeing at the moment is a backlash against globalization. It is comparable with late 19th century backlashes that we saw, which produced populist leaders all over the Northern Hemisphere. What we don't know is how far the backlash will go. And my sense is that for at least the next few years, the backlash against globalization will be dominant. I'd love to promise you that progressive forces will triumph, as Mr. Gottlieb in the New Yorker believes, but I imagine they thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election roughly 14 days ago in the way that most liberals did. And I think they may be disappointed about more than just the election. The people who are identified as non-college educated whites are generally older people who were born into an era when college was for the elite. This big expansion of higher education that happened really from the late 1960s onwards only recently reached the point that more or less half of people go to some kind of college. So I don't think that that's really what we're seeing here, although I agree with you that the cost of higher education has become egregiously high in the United States, and I am not convinced that most degrees are worth what people pay for them. But actually, what's happening there is that you have a generation of millennials going to universities, getting encumbered with debt, having rather worthless degrees. Those people seem to move to the left politically rather than to the right. The non-college educated whites who voted for Donald Trump are people mostly over 50 who are voting in a kind of backlash against not only globalization but progressive culture. mean, those people don't like feminism, don't like globalization, don't like multiculturalism, don't like immigration, don't like free trade. And I suspect that that's really what has been a significant driver of the election. It's all described pretty well by Charles Murray in his book Coming Apart, which was published I think 4 years ago. One of the most prescient works of sociology of modern times. It's now quite a long time since Sam Huntington wrote a book called Who Are We? It was the last book he wrote after the Clash of Civilizations. And it was a book that was very negative about Mexican immigration to the United States. I reviewed it at the time, and I had great respect for Sam, but I thought he got this wrong. And I thought this as a historian. Because as a historian of the United States, you don't need to dig too deeply to see that there have been periods of large-scale migration from different cultures, that there's been a hostility initially, and then there's been a process of assimilation. Things that Donald Trump says about Mexicans today were said by Dennis Kearney about the Chinese in California in the 1870s. And they were being said about the Irish and the South Italians in other parts of the United States at the same time. And now all this seems preposterous. And I have every confidence that in a relatively short space of time, people will look back and say, how extraordinary that people could stigmatize Mexicans in that way now that we have a Mexican president. That will happen. In just the same way that Kennedy became a president. 100 years after, massive anti-Irish prejudice was a feature of American politics. Look, I am a green card holder, not a citizen. I did not vote in the election. My wife is a citizen. I have learned from my own observation that I should become a citizen. And I should have done it a while ago. If you are going to live in the United States, you're a damn fool not to become a citizen. Because you actually are a second-class citizen. It's not just that you can't vote, there are a whole other bunch of ways in which you're worse off. So my message to Mexicans who are making their lives in the United States of America is, you're not betraying Mexico by becoming a US citizen. You are helping yourself, and I think ultimately the United States. It makes no sense to have large groups of people who are not fully integrated into the political process.
What other myths that history could debunk is the word? I don't remember exactly what.
Debunk.
Debunk.
Debunk is a good British English word, I think, for explode or dispel myths. The historian's job is actually to be a myth buster. It's like a ghost buster, only less, I guess, funny. Maybe I could get Bill Murray to be a myth buster and make history sexy. Our task is to take on myths. I'll give you an example. It's widely believed that race was a decisive factor in the US election we just saw. And there's a whole school of journalism writing articles with headlines like whitelash. But a moment's serious historical inquiry suffices to show that race was not the decisive factor in this election. But class was probably as important, and age, generational divisions, maybe even more important. So we have to be, as historians, constantly skeptical. When people are writing the first draft of history, people in your profession, journalists, they're in a hurry, there's a deadline, and there's also a temptation to grab the most obviously appealing narrative. The American media are in a state of crisis because so many people in the media called the election wrong. And I see a kind of paroxysm going on, almost hysterical commentary on what just happened. The historian's job is to take a step back and question skeptically that first narrative. The narrative that is currently being written about the election, and indeed about the transition, will prove to be wrong, almost certainly. It's hard, of course, to do that kind of myth-busting at the time. I'm sure I've written things in the last year that will turn out to future historians to be wrong. Ultimately, the best historical research is based on documents and other evidence that isn't immediately available. We don't really know enough to form a judgment. So it's often 30 or 40 years before we can really figure out what happened. Let me give you one final example. The biggest question of modern history is why people from Western Europe who settled in North America and elsewhere became so much richer and more powerful than everybody else. So that by the early 20th century, roughly a dozen Western empires controlled more or less 2/3 of the world's land surface and population and 3/4 of its economy. That is a huge question. It's even more interesting because in our time it's ceasing to be true. So that should help us explain what happened, the fact that it's stopping. For years, a whole series of wrong answers were given to this question. 100 years ago, people said it's race. The white men are superior. We know that's wrong. That turned out to be completely wrong. Then there was another theory that said, well, it was imperialism. Marxist scholars said, no, it must have been the peculiar quality of imperialism that made Western power so strong. But that's wrong too, because everybody did empire. The least original thing that West Europeans did, starting 500 years ago, was empire. So that's not the answer either. The correct answer turns out to be not race, not empire, not national character, not geography, but ideas and institutions. It's ideas and institutions that make societies grow, that make science spread. And those ideas and institutions that happen to work the best originated in Western Europe. They just started there first, probably by sheer luck. It's kind of lucky that the English were the first people to have the idea of a corporation, to have the idea of law based on private property rights. It was just coincidence that it was intellectuals in Western Europe who had the scientific revolution. But once you have the right ideas, and once you have the institutions that can transmit those ideas, then you can take over the world. And once the rest of the world finally got that, and started to download the killer applications of Western civilization, they were able to grow too. And the Chinese have shown that there is nothing to prevent an Oriental society from achieving the fastest growth rates in history if it has the right ideas and institutions. So that's the ultimate myth busting that has been a part of my work in the last 10 years.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a great evening.